All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Stop, Look, and Listen. I'm your host, LaTroy Gardner. This week, we have Pulitzer Prize winning author, poet, educator, Tyehimba Jess. Welcome to the show, Tyehimba.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, blessed. So, Tyehimba is known for being adept at bridging slam and academic poetry. How did you figure out how to bring those two worlds together?
Man, I came up in Chicago. Well, I was born and raised in Detroit, but I spent 18 years in Chicago, starting college at about 19. So I started going to open mics, went to a whole lot of open mics in Chicago, places like that are, were pretty seminal for a lot of people, like Spice's Lounge. It's way back in like early 90s. It's where the movie Love Jones was kind of based off of. I'm forgetting the name of the brother that it will come to me. The name of the brother that used to go to Spice's Lounge that wrote Love Jones and all that. And then I would just go to open mics all the time. And then I did slam at the Green Mill for a couple years, 99 and 2000. And, I really think that if slam teaches you anything, it teaches you this. If you don't have the audience's attention in the first 20 seconds, it's not going to happen. So it taught me that. And then, I was very interested in history and people that had shaped the Black sounds like Leadbelly. So I brought that kind of sensibility into writing about historical subjects. So I think that's how it happened.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned that you grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Just talk about your childhood and growing up in a household that was so committed to serving the community.
Wow. Well, I'll say I'm blessed to have both my mother and father still with me. My dad's rolling up on 92. My mother's rolling into 90 this year. My mother was out of Oklahoma, and she was born and raised there. She went to she actually was born in Oklahoma, and then after her parents died, she moved to Tulsa. I'm sorry, no, to Little Rock. And she actually went to the high school that was segregated. She went to I'm forgetting the name of the high school right now, but she went to the segregated high school, and when she wanted to go to college, the state decided that they didn't want to have her go to any colleges in Arkansas, but so she went to Howard University, and she went to the Friedman School of Nursing there. And I think she was there around the time that Toni Morrison was there. I'm pretty sure she was. And then she came to Detroit, and she became a registered nurse, and she got her degrees in nursing. And she eventually was kind of at the right place at the right time and had the right set of skills to become kind of delegated to be the first dean of nursing of Wayne County Community College, meaning that in becoming dean, that means she had to basically create the program. I mean, write the curriculum, design the classes, recruit the professors, this, that, the other. And the significance of that was that at that point, you're talking like the early 1970s, very early 1970s, there were no black, there were no institutions in the city of Detroit that accepted black students in the city of Detroit. And as you know, I mean, nursing is a very stable, considered a very stable way to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And she uh, is, I mean, that was a very significant thing for her to do. She started really the first school of nursing in Detroit that accepted black folks, which provided an economic ladder for hundreds of households. And I mean, to me, it's not like uh, it was a thing. It was just seeing my mom go to work for many, many, many hours every day, But that was what she did, and she worked that job for probably about 20 odd years.
Mm-hmm.
My father was out of Greenville, South Carolina, and he uh, had an interesting situation where he happened upon a kind of group a kind of a group of Catholic priests that were providing a kind of educational opportunity that was very unique for young men in Greenville, South Carolina at the time. And then he went from there to Xavier University in Louisiana, and he got his BA. And then he went to Detroit. It's in the early 1950s. And Detroit in the 1950s, where my mom and dad met, was on par with, like New York and Chicago. I mean, it was banging. It was in its economic heights, and it was also more or less desegregated compared to the places where my mom and dad came from. So at any rate, he went to Detroit, and he joined Wayne State University's PhD program in chemistry, and he got a PhD around the age of 27. And he eventually became the director of labs for the city of Detroit. And he maintained that position for roughly about 30 odd years. And at the same time, he ran for several positions in the local NAACP. And the NAACP in Detroit was kind of a kind of a kind of an important political position in a way. He also ran for city council.
Mm-hmm.
So, I came from a very civic-oriented household with very, very high academic standards and lots of books around the house. I mean, I think my dad subscribed to probably at least 30 magazines, from chemistry to ebony to time, da 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 da. So there's a lot of stuff to read around the house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
so yeah.
yeah. So, how did having that front row seat to activism kind of dovetail not only into your writing but also your interest in serving the community?
Yeah, I would say that I think that the way I absorbed it mostly was through their attention to current events and their conversation about the current political, whatever was going on in politics at the time. And uh, their um, they were very much interested in in us and their children acquiring as much education as they possibly could. You know, certain grades you didn't come home with. You know what I mean? Uh, and I think that it grew towards my understanding of a kind of civic responsibility to try to do something that benefited Black folks in some kind of way. So that is that's how I absorbed it. You know, I mean, when you're 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever years old, you're not really thinking about it in that way. It's more of a subconscious understanding that you're developing of how to the move around in your community. But I also have to say, you know, I was growing up in Detroit. In Detroit, I mean, that was you know, very, you know, from the first time I knew what a mayor was, my mayor was Black. The first time I knew what a city council was, you know, the city council was, you know, we had Black people on it, you know. So I grew up in a kind of very, you know, somewhat unique situation for Black Americans in the United States, which didn't seem odd to me at all, you know.
Okay. So you started writing poetry at 16. So at what point did you feel confident enough in your work to share them and then begin entering competitions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started writing when I was about 16, and I would just, you know, I originally wanted to just write joke books.
Mm-hmm.
And I always told my mom I was going to write her a joke book. But I have the something not that far from it. You know, if you think about poetry and comedy, there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of, you know, the idea of the idea of trying to get to the center of an understanding with a quickness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started writing when I was like 14, 15. And then by the time I was 18, I don't know, I entered a contest that was run by the NAACP it was called the ACT-SO competition, the Academic Olympics. And it's my understanding that Dudley Randall, who is was the famous publisher of Broadside Press at the time, was one of the judges, and according to my understanding, he was really the only one of the judges that really dug my poem enough and gave it enough weight to get it into the final round of this competition and won second prize. So thank you, Dudley. And that was just as I was on my way. It was like right after my senior year of high school. I got this affirmation from this, relatively obscure, tiny program, run by the NAACP that let me know, you know what, maybe this might be something, you might be halfway good at. And then I went to college at University of Chicago, and I became an English major, and it made me forget all about poetry. It seemed, very, very remote. And towards the end of my college experience, I met another poet named Sterling Plump, who, I took a class with this brother, and I was like, that's what I want to do. What does he do? He comes to class and he talks about books that he's read. I'm sure I could get better than that. And so he also kind of affirmed that maybe I could make something out of putting pen to page. And then after that, I kind of found my way back into poetry.
So did he know that he was kind of lighting that fire under you to return to poetry?
Yeah, I think he did because I had given up on poetry, but I was taking this class, and it's called the Black Aesthetic,
Hmm.
and he would discuss the myriad ways that the Black aesthetic informs everyday culture, in literature, et cetera, et cetera. And I would start wondering, well, who is this cat? He's talking about blackness, et cetera. So I went to get one of his books, and I got a book, got one of his books. The name will occur to me in a minute. And I read it, and I was like, I didn't think poetry was like this.
Hmm.
I never understood that poetry could be like this. And uh, and I remember I went to his office. I never went to people's. It's not part of my college habit to go to a professor's office hours. But I went to his office. This is actually one of the only two black male professors really teachers I had in my entire academic experience. I'm talking from kindergarten all the way through college. Him and another fantastic gentleman named Edgar Epps out of want to raise his name out of University of Chicago. He taught about pedagogy.
Hmm.
At any rate, I went to his office and I was like, how did you do this? What is this? I mean, how did you figure out how to write like this? And I distinctly remember him leaning back in his chair and saying, well, "That's part of the job." And what he was saying was, that's the part of the job of being a poet is to see things that other people see and then re-see them and revision them in a way that is different, you know. And we commenced dialogue, and he became a great mentor to me. He's still around too. So yeah.
Okay. So, how did you come up with your pen name?
Huh. Well, Tyehimba Jess is my legal name,
Okay.
but I will say that it started off as a kind of pen name. In that, well, at the time I was in college. I was at University of Chicago, right? And I started studying with people with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and I started becoming more cognizant of African history, African American history, and it started challenging me to re-understand who and where I was and how I was moving through the world. And and as a result, I started thinking about, well, I was caught between this political sphere and this kind of artistic sphere, and it made me think. At the time, I would go to open mics a lot, and a lot of people had their poet names, et cetera, et cetera. My feeling on it was that I wanted to have a name that I could eventually adopt as my entire name, my actual
Hmm.
name. And what I didn't want to do was I didn't want to go through a lot of names. That's one thing I did not want to do. So I found an African name book. I distinctly remember, looking through it, and riding around with it on the bus in Chicago, and having it close to me, and narrowing down various names. And Tyehimba means we stand as a nation, and Jess is my original first name, and that was my father's name and his father's name. So I felt like I would take the Jesse and make it my last name, and take Tyehimba and make it my first name. And also, I kind of dug the poetry of it, and I also like the African American of it, and the biblical of it, and the Jess, the tree of Jesse, da da da. So I that's how that happened. And I did not make it legal until around 90. So I started I started under Tyehimba Jess around like 92, 93. And I made it legal around 98, no, 99. That's when I made it legal. So I got tired of, I had one job where these people were like, we gonna call you by the name the government has on on your ID. That's how we gonna call you. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I need to change my name then.
Mm-hmm. Nice story. Um, so we were talking earlier about, the you being able to blend the slam poetry scene with academic poetry. Um, what did you learn from slam poetry? Was it sort of where you learned how to be a performer more than just reciting your poetry?
Yeah, I learned just to back it up. I learned a lot from being in open mics. I think open mics are a great way to form community, to I mean to get a start and to have a group of people. And I guess I kind of come back at it like this, is that there's so many spaces where Black folks feel unlistened to and ignored and silenced. And open mic is one of those spaces where that was opening up at that time in the 90s. I'm sure there's still open mics now, but where people could feel like this is a group of people that will listen to me and they will empathize with where I'm coming from. And I can kind of air these issues that I've had on my mind and on my heart, and and also deliver this message, this issue in a way that is impactful through my voice and through my movement, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so that's really a lot of where that started, and it starts to you from learning from watching other people on stage do their thing. So going to open mic and waiting for 2 hours or an hour to be on stage and hit it for 5 minutes. And learning and also just getting that group of people that will exchange information and conversation with you about not just your poem, but about poetry, about politics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a lot where that started. And then going into slam is like another level of that. I was at the Green Mill in Chicago with I think the I got to see Mark Smith and the Poetry Slam kind of develop. I mean, they started in the mid '80s, and I wasn't on the set until like the '90s. But I'd been I rode through a few of their sets, and I'd seen them in action. And one thing I say, there's a couple things that I think have been really pivotal movements in American poetry, and slam is definitely one of them. And for that, Mark Smith is owed a huge debt of gratitude for starting slam, for continuing slam at the Green Mill, um, and fostering this place in in the American everyday life, and not in the American kind of recreational life, because you're in a recreational space. You're in a bar, okay, at,
Mm-hmm.
at generally after work, right? Creating this space in our recreational life where we could think about difficult issues or in the form of poetry, um, and also hear poetry in a non-academic setting, which is what I would, which is what I think it was really a lot of his impetus was about. It was a feeling that poetry only belonged in the academy in the voice of of kind of abstraction. Not that that was entirely true, but that is the way that poetry was perceived.
Mm-hmm.
And what the slam did is it reached out to just every, you could be sitting in the audience, you could be a construction worker, could be a teacher, could be a doctor, you know, whatever. You didn't have to have a background in poetry. You didn't have to have a PhD or an English degree to receive this poem, and then also to critique it, you know, based on what you thought the poem was doing, what the performance of the poem was, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so I got to see people like Patricia Smith, Reggie Gibson, you know, uh, a lot of people come through that space and just bring with them their intimate and intricate understanding of the world and illuminate places that I had previously not been privy to. So I think that I guess maybe I'm getting away from I'm elaborating too much on the on the
No, no, do go ahead. You could.
but um, I learned a lot from
Mm-hmm.
from slam.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, just talk about your creative process. And do you allow the ideas to just flow organically, or do you, um, after doing some research, say this is what I'm inspired to write about?
Yeah, it's a combination of the two. I mean, the books that I write are really, I guess I would say they're heavily research based in that I spend a lot of time researching historical figures and eras in order to get an understanding of what and who they were and how they were trying to achieve a realization of their dreams, so to speak. So in Leadbelly, I'm talking about a guitar player who went to prison twice, who was really didn't have much of a future staring at him, but was able to dig into his work and into his artistic work and create a life for himself in in a kind of envisioning, really an envisioning of of the sound of America through he was called King of the 12 String. So I was really interested in that journey for him. And then when it came to Olio, it was more about who were the people that were were inspiring Leadbelly. Who was the generation of people that were were Leadbelly adjacent or preceded him. And
Mm-hmm.
these are Black people who were uh, slaves, uh, enslaved themselves, and came out of slavery and started artistic lives in which they could feed themselves and their families and 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 explore their imaginations. And that was a new experience for an entire generation of Black folks. What do I do with my newfound freedom? Well, I'm gonna be uh, I'm gonna be a singer. I'm going to be a comedian. In some cases, I'm going to carve an image out of rock. You know, so I'm gonna play piano. You know, this. I mean, it was like the fastening of a formerly bound imagination onto all of the artistic facets that it could find, and that is what really intrigued me
Mm-hmm.
with the book Olio.
All right. Well, to continue with Olio, how long did it take for you to research and write Olio? And were there any of the creatives that was left on the cutting room floor that you wish could have made the book?
The book took about 7 years, more or less, to write. 7.5, something like that, years to write. I would say there were a lot of people that I wish I could have had in the mind. There's two I can think of offhand.
Hmm.
One was a guy named I think his name was Henry Chauvin. This is a piano player who was up in Chicago, who Scott Joplin actually helped wrote down one of his rags. I believe it's called the heliotrope rag. And this cat was apparent was just crazy talented,
Hmm.
but he did not write music, which was not uncommon. Uh, but he was just extremely talented uh, uh, piano player who died, if I remember correctly, of syphilis, which apparently was a not uncommon fate. I would say syphilis back then was. I don't mean I'm not. I don't mean to make any inaccurate historical comparisons, but it was a little bit like HIV.
Yeah, I figured you was gonna say that.
It was almost impossible to cure, but a lot of people had it, and it shortened a lot of lives. And he died of that. So did Scott Joplin, actually.
Hmm.
And there are a few other people. There was a whole nother story about a I feel like I'm giving away ideas. Yeah, okay, but I'm gonna tell you. But so there was a whole nother story about, imagine a group of a group of uh, black folks who used to be slaves around 1870s, mid 1870s, forming a Jubilee choir, meaning a group of people that sang spirituals.
Hmm.
Imagine them traveling around the world, that like the Jubilee singers, but also going to South Africa in the 1880s, 1890s, right? And journeying through South Africa. Imagine what their experience was. Well, that did happen. And 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 some of them, I believe, I can't remember all the exact details of their story, but some of them, I think, either stayed there or got stranded there. Lots of fascinating stories. That I just could not fit in, could not really quite get them in the book. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
So to the audience, Olio is a Pulitzer Prize winning collection by my guest, Tyehimba Jess. So, but it sounds like from what you were just saying that there's a possibility of a part two.
Oh man, there could be the part 3 through 8, whatever. If you really wanted to go through all the, I mean, that period of time. I'm talking like Civil War to World War I. It's really, it's seen in a kind of monolithic way. I mean, but there's a lot of things. Um, there's a lot of things that were happening back then. Black folks were doing so much on so many different levels, uh,
Hmm.
that you know there's a lot of stuff that could be written about that particular time period. You're talking about the time period in which you're dealing with, having an industrial revolution, opening up, I should say, the the um, uh, taking of land in the western states, right?
Hmm.
That kind of like genocidal war that was happening. You're having all kinds of all kinds of things happening during that time period, and black folks were just doing just in in many ways just trying to survive. In many ways, but in other ways, thriving. you know. So uh, it's a very, very interesting time period.
Right. So now let's transition into the classroom. You're currently serving as the associate professor of English at the College of Staten Island. Um,
Uh, it's,
so
it's distinguished now.
distinguished professor. So we hear of the difficulties of NBA greats like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Patrick Ewing when they hang up the sneakers and get into coaching. Um, do you experience any of those growing pains, like teaching initially, and like are your students sometimes in awe of their professor being a Pulitzer Prize
I
winning author?
Nah, no. You know, I think one thing I dig about where I work is it's an extremely diverse student body. Um, I mean, a lot of first generation American students from all over every corner of the world. Sometimes students that are as old as me or older.
Hmm.
Uh, excuse me. A lot of continuing students who dropped out, came back. You know, um, it's I went, I did, but you know, a student generally students are not. This is all undergrads, so generally students are not that you know aware of who their professor is. You know, most of the time I'm just another English professor. So
Okay.
I kind of prefer it that
Yeah, I'm sure you do. You seem kind of like low key and very humble, which I like that. That's kind of how I am. So, what advice do you give your students, especially when it comes to writing about, our present day climate?
You know, it's interesting because we started off this semester talking about January 6th at the Capitol,
Hmm.
attempted coup, and I think it was an excellent opportunity uh, to raise the issue of documentary poetics, and that it was a reminder to me that this is an echo. January 6th was an echo of what happened in 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina, when there was an actual coup of an entire city government that had been uh, won by the black population of that town. And the white folks were just upset with that, and they decided we can't tolerate this, and they went essentially on a killing spree and killed a lot of black people and ran a bunch of them out of town. And so when you saw what was happening in January 6th, you were seeing an echo of what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I do emphasize to them to have an understanding of, by the time I just say by the time you leave college, you should have a basic understanding of what happened when in American history. This was when the Civil War happened. This was when the World War I, World War II, etc. When this movement happened, and what were the consequences thereof, in order to understand what is going on right now. And don't think that the literature of the country is separate from that history. It's intimately bound to that history and informed by that history and shaped by it. Uh, and you have the opportunity to learn from it and write about more than just butterflies and sunsets and rainbows and how your heart got broke.
Okay. All right. So what's next? I know you just released an essay, last month, "Ancestral Wealth: The Sacred Black Masculine in My Life."
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. That's an essay about black men and how they have shaped my understanding, my artistic understanding, my personal understanding. in a historical way. So maybe there's some more essays I have that I can add to that. Maybe that's working on some essays, and I'm also working on. I'm really interested in slave revolts in American history. There's actually way more slave revolts. There was more resistance than we give credit to, you know. And so I'm kind of interested in those as well.
Okay. So before I let you go, feel free to plug your socials or anything else you need to plug.
You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Facebook. You can just type my name and you'll find me pretty quick. I don't use any fancy names, but I'm not hip to Instagram. I gotta be real. I'm not, haven't quite got to that Instagram level yet. So I'm working on it. I think I for particular reasons. I would also say, however, that I did say I was part of a couple of very important movements, and one was Slam, but the other one would definitely be Cave Canem, CAVECANEM, which is a fellowship of Black poets who started in 1996, started by Toy Derricott and Cornelius Eady. And it's a home for Black poetry that has fostered many, many, many poets, such as myself. I really would not be here without Cave Canem. So you look at every other Black Pulitzer Prize winner since Yusef Komunyakaa has had a connection to Cave Canem. That's Natasha Trethewey, Tracy K. Smith, Gregory Pardlow, myself, and Jericho Brown. Five within the last 20 years have all been connected to that organization, Cave Canem.
Yeah, I had interviewed Kwame Dawes last week, and he mentioned this.
Artist working man in poetry.
Yep. Trust me, I got on his case because he needs to update his bio on his website. So
he has to update it every 5 minutes. What are you talking about? You got 3 books coming out every year.
That's why we were going at it about that. He was like, correction, I published 22. And I was like, well, you need to update your website. But
won two major awards in the last month, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I spoke to him last week, and I have you this week, and I have a couple more coming down the road. So I mean, I'm glad that I'm being embraced by the elite. You know?
Don't go there. No, it's not. It's just trying to put one word in front of the other. That's all.
All right. So I thank you, sir. I thank you for your time today. I thank you for your commitment to, I guess, opening our eyes to history that we haven't been, taught or been force-fed. And I thank you for the way that you do it. And I thank you for the humility and grace that you display.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing me on your show. I really, really appreciate the time to talk with you. And I dig your hat.
Yeah, yours too. We shop at the same store. All right, so for Stop, Look, and Listen, I'm your host, LaTroy Gardner. See you next week. Peace and blessings.
Peace.
Thank you for checking us out on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe for more great content. And don't forget to check us out on social media at GOB Radio Network.